In today's video, we're going to be diving into the upcoming pattern, taking a big look at the tropics where things are changing rapidly. We now have a high risk of development out there in the Atlantic. And we also have a tropical system to watch in the Eastern Pacific. The reason being is that this one, as it breaks up and moves onshore to Mexico likely, it's going to move into the south central states and eventually into the eastern states with some storminess potentially for many different areas of the United States due to that system. So it is actually leading to implications. Pretty interesting stuff. We're of course going to go over the overall storminess in the entire nation, which is going to obviously involve again that Eastern Pacific system. And then also we're going to be diving into those very, very cool temperatures compared to normal that we expect to last probably pretty close to the midway point of the month, maybe even to it, and maybe, just maybe, even beyond it. So let's go ahead and dive into things. Again, taking a look at the tropics where we can obviously see this high risk area of development. We can see this here. I'm actually going to go ahead and pause the playback right there real quickly. First off, we'll talk about this system. We now have a 30% chance of development over the next 2 days, which is a big jump. And then a 70% chance of development over the next 7 days, which is a 30% increase from yesterday. So odds are rapidly increasing that we will see this one develop. And at 70%, it is much more likely than not that we do see this system develop. As we can see, it's going to take a few days. This is by the 5th here. It's just starting to get its act together here in that very eastern section of the risk area. And originally, a couple days ago, we saw the GFS wanted to curve this one way outside of the cone. Now it's much more in line with what the National Hurricane Center is thinking, keeping this one for the most part within the cone. So let's keep moving this forward. We can see it starting to get its act together. Probably a tropical storm by the 7th, according to the GFS model. Maybe even pushing towards hurricane status. And then certainly by the time it's reaching the very western area of this cone, this looks like it's certainly a category 1 or 2 hurricane, at least according to the model. Of course, again, this isn't a forecast. I'm just trying to break down what the model is showing. It is north of the eastern Caribbean there, and we actually do see some pretty nice curvature to the north over time. As you can see, way far away from Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and Haiti. Much more of a threat to Bermuda at this point. And actually, this one hits Bermuda pretty directly here. We'll zoom in here. But we can see it has somewhat of an eye, some really strong outer bands, and Bermuda's just getting hammered by this one on this model run. Of course, this is by the 14th, so this is very, very far out, beyond 10 days out. So time will tell. But I would say this one, as of now, can't rule it out for anywhere. This one could be moving through the Caribbean. This one could be a threat to the East Coast. This one could be a near miss, or like the GFS model is showing, it could be a pretty well offshore miss. So again, it's the same situation as our previous system where there is a multitude of different possibilities. And it's important to note this. A lot of people were kind of irritated in the comments when we were talking about that previous tropical system. And forgive me, I can't remember the name off the top of my head right now. But the hurricane that came very, very close to the Outer Banks and actually caused a lot of impacts to that area. That system was originally expected to be way out there, like by Bermuda, and then every single model run, it consistently trended a little bit further west. It was something like this, and then the next one, it was like this, and then the next one, right? It kept just pushing further and further west until it was very close to hitting the Outer Banks by the end of it. So we can see major trends away from the initial look of where a system is supposed to go. Am I saying this is for sure going to happen? Absolutely not. And typically, the most likely outcome is what the models are agreeing on in the long range with a track like this. But it can deviate way outside of that. And oftentimes we get new information as the hurricane hunters go into this, and you can see a lot of big changes. So this is going to be one that we have to track. Again, anybody along the Gulf or East Coast, it's so early in the game, you need to be aware. Also, everybody in the Caribbean needs to be aware, and especially Bermuda as well. Pretty much everybody needs to be paying attention to this one along any of these Atlantic coastlines. So we will keep you guys up to date with that system. I do want to talk about this one, though, and this is Tropical Storm Lorena. And we're going to actually go ahead and skip this all the way back to the beginning here, so we could just track this one moving through. And we can see it here, again, pretty close to that kind of west coast of Mexico there. And this one goes into Mexico, moves over the southern areas of Arizona, New Mexico, and into Texas and Oklahoma with some thunderstorms, and into Arkansas and Louisiana. I mean, this is our system right here. Obviously not tropical by this point, but it does have implications as far as storminess, which is kind of hard to come by actually in the upcoming pattern. So it's very notable. And by the time we're reaching the 9th here at 5 a.m., we can see the Ohio Valley, a lot of the Great Lakes, a lot of the Deep South seeing thunderstorms and showers because of this. And eventually even the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast by the 10th, 8 days from now. This is important because that's one of the driest areas as of late compared to normal, and they certainly need the precipitation badly. So this is incredibly good news actually for these areas to see precipitation from this system. With all that being said, let's dive into some of our other model guidance where we'll take a look at the European model, some of the storminess, the precipitation, and of course, those temperatures. As we take a look here at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook here from the Climate Prediction Center and of course the National Weather Service, we can see that this runs from September 7th through the 11th. I'm realizing now this is actually yesterday, so let me see if I can refresh this. There we go. We're getting a good update there. September 2nd, this goes from the 8th through the 12th now. And as you can see, still a lot of warmth out west overall. There is some cooler areas here for California, Nevada. That is going to play a role. I think the main thing is that typically when we have these warmer temperatures in the west, it's more centered along the west coast, and then you get the jet stream troughing down and ridging up. But because that warm up is so much further west, you get more of an east-based look. And this is part of why we're so dry in the east, because typically the eastern side of that jet stream where it's moving northward is where storms will move along. Well, if they're way offshore like this, you're going to have very minimal impacts, obviously, to the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. And that is part of our upcoming dryness, is just you're in the middle of a trough. If you're not close to that jet stream, you're likely missing out on a lot of the precipitation. So we're going to be watching these areas very close to the center for that type of impact. Areas along the plains where we see these things lowering could get a little bit more beneficial precipitation. And also the Deep South, where obviously there's some warmth pushing back, humidity, overall instability, cooler temperatures moving southward. That's going to be a bit of a battle zone where we could see a lot of precipitation. Looking at the 8 to 14 day outlook, which we of course need to refresh, 10th through the 16th, we see even more of these warmer temperatures spreading throughout the central and western states now, with mostly the immediate eastern seaboard expecting potential cool temperatures for this 10th through 15th time frame. Now, we're going to have to wait and see. This is pretty far out, so definitely things can change a little bit, but for now, this is the look, and it looks like a transitionary one where we're going to be transitioning from a much cooler pattern to something much closer to normal in the east. That can, of course, change, like I mentioned, but we're going to watch it regardless. Here is the past 2 days of temperatures, and the reason why we're doing past 2 days is because we're at September 2nd. So this is your September so far through 2 days, obviously a very small sample size, but we can tell there's been cooler temperatures prevailing, especially for the plains, Midwest, Deep South, Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, Southeast, and even the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic here through the first 2 days here of the month. And we can see a very strong and healthy positive PNA out west here for the western seaboard of Canada and the United States, which has helped to aid some of that cooler air moving down into the central and the eastern states here. Looking at the storminess, or lack thereof, we're going to see a pretty major lack. Two things I want to watch. I mean, really on this model run, we get a lot less implications from this system. It kind of curves in, and then it's a bit of a question mark. So we're pretty much similar there to the GFS. But after that point, it really doesn't lead to as many impacts. It's important to note we have this very strong low between the Hudson Bay and Great Lakes. We've been mentioning that for a few days. Really, really intense bowing cold front, and that's pulling in the cold air to the central and eastern states. Typically, these lows moving through this area is a sign of cold air moving in, and we sure enough get it here. You almost get a second cold front going as this secondary low, your primary low is up here, or was. It develops a secondary low along that cold front, and that one actually swings up into that again in between Hudson Bay and Great Lakes area. And we get the effect all over again where you almost have a cold front dragging with this one and more cooler air able to move in for Friday on the 5th here. So let's watch this play out. We get a really intense trough during this time frame. Most of our precipitation during the model run is going to look like this, where it's mostly the southeast and deep south, as well as the Rockies getting precipitation. But again, notice the inner portions of the trough, very, very dry comparatively. That is something we're going to be thinking about, and really watching the whole model run. We don't get a lot of precipitation up there in the Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast until the 17th. Over 300 hours out on the model run. And I wouldn't even be so confident in that because of how far out it is. So that is definitely something we're going to be monitoring. Again, really consequential for sure. Total precipitation reflects that. We do get decent amounts for the more northern areas of the Northwest, Plains, Midwest, and Great Lakes here. But compared to normal, these eastern areas typically see more precipitation than their western counterparts. And this is just not enough. This is really bad in these areas. We're a little more decent along the coastlines, but it's still bad there too. Looking at these maps, I mean, we are looking at below average precipitation for the majority of this area I just drew in, and severely below normal along the Gulf Coast, areas of the southeast and mid-Atlantic, and even into southern New England. Really, really bad stuff. Again, the most above normal, or at least close to normal areas, will be this northwest, north central, kind of Great Lakes area, where we do get decent amounts there, but really a dry look overall. Total temperatures coming up, the temperature anomalies, total temperatures. Yeah, temperature anomalies. Here, we see this trough move in for the 3rd, Wednesday here. Very cool temperatures compared to normal. Thursday the 4th as well, spreading in even further. Friday the 5th, Saturday the 6th, Sunday the 7th, really, really intruding into the entire eastern states. Friday the 8th, this thing's still around. Tuesday the 9th, Wednesday the 10th, and then we kind of just stick around with these semi-cooler temperatures, especially along the East Coast. But even that breaks up after the 14th on Sunday here, where we start to warm up in the East overall. Again, that big change is coming far enough into the pattern where we can tell you to take it with a grain of salt. It's not a sure thing yet, but definitely we're going to be watching for that potential change. Usually these types of patterns don't last forever, so we're going to be watching. The GFS model is going to concur for the most part. This cooler air sticking around through the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, especially along the immediate eastern states. But the only thing it doesn't agree on is this is the 18th. We still see at least close to normal conditions in the east, if not mostly below normal in this eastern area, all the way past the 15th, past the halfway mark of the month, and all the way by Thursday the 18th. So all stuff to think about. All stuff we're going to be thinking about, definitely paying close attention to this as we move deeper and deeper into the fall. With all of this stuff being said, be sure to subscribe. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.